Sarah Strong is the best player in America. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just want to say a quick thank you for everyone that's supporting the show. We truly appreciate it. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering the UConn women's and men's basketball programs, the hoops capital of the world, and we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. And to show that gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to UConn games. Super Bowl 59 is here. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers can get just $5, can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the UConn Huskies solidified their place atop the Big East standings with a 72-61 win over Creighton in the highly anticipated road matchup, something that we kind of talked about. We're going to bring Bella in here in a second to continue her co-hosting duties with us here at Locked On. I think it was an interesting game because it started really slow. There was the rims felt tight. UConn was able to kind of get a decent advantage and kind of built it, I believe, all the way up to 20 at some point, and it kind of dropped down. I think the final score obviously was an 11-point victory. Paige came alive in the second half, but it was really Sarah Strong who carried the Huskies from the start, and it's why I believe she is the best player in the country. We're going to bring in Bella Tamano here and talk about my assertion, and if she agrees or disagrees, coming up. We bring in Bella Tamano of Hoops Capital of the World and a Locked On UConn co-host with me for Tuesdays or Mondays and Wednesdays. All right, Bella, I dropped a little bombshell today in the first thing when this comes out, it'll be afternoon, saying that Sarah Strong is the best player in America. Do you agree or disagree?
Listen, so I don't hate going for it and putting all your eggs in one basket and saying, all right, I think she's the best player. In my opinion, I think it's just too early for those conversations. Okay. And the only reason I say that is because when we did our lists of the top 10 players of the Paige Bueckers era, I think we both kind of agreed on we'd like to put her higher on that list. But as of now, she's only played a half a season with UConn.
But that was before the Creighton game.
Yes, that is true. I'll give you that. That is true. The only reason I feel this way is because I want to see her. I want to see her play in the tournament where the stakes are higher, where there's a lot more pressure and there's a lot more on the line. And that's not to diminish her abilities at all, but that's the only thing I need to see. At the end of the season, if we're having the same talk and she's 20 plus points and double-digit rebounds, 8 offensive boards and 8 defensive boards and 4 offensive boards among assists and steals and everything, then against a team like, Ohio State, Notre Dame, 1,000%, I'll look back at you and say, Mark, you told me. You were right. But for now, I would have to say I disagree just a little bit, just based on the fact that stat-wise, if you look at stats, obviously, stat can't necessarily quantify like that exact impact. Sometimes you just have a feeling, which I totally respect. But right now, I'm looking at, the NCAA stat leader. She's not really in the top 20 areas for points or rebounds or assists. And again, definitely has an impact on this team. That's the only thing I'm seeing right now, according to ESPN. Right. But again, I do think that
this is why, though, and I appreciate you. Like, I know that a lot of people are gonna, you and other people are, strongly disagree, slightly disagree, whatever. They don't think that that's the right thing to say right now. But I can tell you that the reason why I started to feel that, and I really did feel this way on Saturday, because it was a an all UConn day where, I was waiting, obviously waiting for the women to play and then the men after that. The women were playing probably their toughest competition since they played Notre Dame. So that's a road game in the Big East, which, we know that the Big East is down this year, but Creighton was ranked to start the year and they have a decent team. They are helped by the home crowd, but also that was just an ugly game to start. And when the rubber meets the road, and I'm not saying Paige doesn't do this because, people will get on me for that too. So what about Paige? Paige is going to be the number one pick in the draft. She's amazing. Yeah. She's one of the reasons why, this team is going to contend, if not the main reason why she's going to contend for a Final Four. But if they win a national championship this year, it's going to be because Sarah Strong is leading them in several categories like she did against Creighton, because Paige is not as assertive as people want her to be, and that's okay. She doesn't have to be now because she has Sarah Strong, because she has AZ Fudd as her kind of Robin to her Batman. My biggest thing about Sarah is she's starting to become the alpha, if you will. 26 points, 12 rebounds, 5 steals, 4 blocks in this game. She didn't miss a shot from the free throw line. She had 16 points in the first half when this UConn offense was really struggling. It felt like the rim's really tight in Omaha. So it's just one of those things where when things start to not go great for this team, who's the player that steps up the most? And this year, Sarah's been the most consistent because she's been available for every game. She hasn't missed any, knock on wood, making sure she doesn't, get hurt. But she also has this aura about her. What do people call it? Whether it's swagger, whether it's, aura, nothing bothers her. She's like, and I mean this with all sincerity, she's almost too young and immature to know how good she is. And that's a dangerous combination because, you get like 22, 23 years old in college basketball, like Paige and others. And you start to kind of like feel yourself where you're like, you know what, I'm really good. And I know what I'm doing out there. Sarah just kind of like, she kind of looks like she wandered onto a court and just was like a savant. And it's just does what she does. Like it's so innate. It has zero to, and this has zero to do with, you can give me Lauren Betts, you can give me Hannah Hidalgo, you can give me all these other names outside of UConn, Kiki Arifin, Juju Watkins, all of these fantastic players who are going to be big time names in the NCAA tournament. But just there's something about Sarah, and maybe it's it's that old movie. There's something about Mary. There's just something about Sarah. There's just something about Sarah that I just am drawn to. She's the perfect player in this era of basketball. She's a 3-level scorer. She can do it all, and she's a phenomenal defensive player. 5 steals and 4 blocks. Like it's not just like Juju Watkins. You can be like, she's the best scorer in the country. Paige, you could say she's the most efficient player in the country. Lauren Betts at 6'7" and is a monster, is probably the most impactful player in the respect of, it's hard to just like even get a shot up off of her because she's a mountain. But with Sarah, she does everything well. Everything. There is not a weakness in her game. And her only weakness is when people go, well, she's just a freshman. I just think she's that good.
That's true. I agree with you. I mean, she's cool as a cucumber, like you said. I mean, she is truly, even in her press conferences I've seen, like, she's kind of like, she's like nervous.
She's awkward.
And it's like, dude, you just went out there and dominated the game, and she's still kind of acting like she didn't, which, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing at all. But
Bella, when I was in a press conference with her, in Greensboro, she grew up an hour away from Greensboro. A guy from, I forget, maybe USA Today asked her, hey, you must have come to the ACC tournament when it was played in Greensboro here. And she gave a one-word answer. She went, nope. She has no time for anything but basketball. And I think that's the beauty of her.
I love her. And again, the future is going to be very bright with Sarah Strong in the Huskies uniform. The only thing is I just don't want, I know it's definitely longer than a insanity run, but that's the only thing I don't want to do. I'm not saying that, this is a fluke. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that is the furthest from what I'm saying. I just need this to happen for a complete season, and I just want to see against South Carolina and against Tennessee. And then as we get into that Big East tournament time and actual tournament time, that's when, listen, I'm totally fine to say, hey, Mark, you told me, like I said, I'm totally fine. You can say I told you so. That's totally fine.
All right.
Just right as of now, I just like to go that far ahead. I don't like to make that assumption just because, again, don't want to jinx anything, and also just feel like maybe it's not her time yet to put her in that category.
That's the New Englander in you. You don't want to jinx anything. I
Yeah,
totally appreciate that. All right, when we
very
return,
superstitious.
that's right. We're going to talk about the crazy attendance numbers that the UConn women they draw. And guess what? Creighton had the best attendance they've had for a women's basketball game in the Chi Health Center in Omaha. We're going to talk about that and what that means and everything about that game coming up after this. This message is from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes, we're waiting and wondering and worrying if we're going to get any money back or if we have to own. Oh, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now taxes is matched with TurboTax Expert, who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates in their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All with getting the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantee. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn with Bella Tamano of Hoops Capital of the World and of our co-host here at Locked On UConn. All right, so I think I texted this to you a couple days ago about how I thought it was really cool that the UConn women drew the highest attendance for Creighton. So you're welcome, Creighton, for us filling your seats. It was played in front of Creighton's largest home crowd in program history, 11,141. It was the team's fourth contest ever inside the Chi Health Center in Omaha. So they typically play these games, I think, on campus. So they moved that to the arena where the men typically play, and where I'm sure the UConn men will be playing again this year. My biggest thing is it's you're drawing the highest attendance, but it was also a great game. Like I know it ended up being like a 10-point game, and it was probably a little sloppy at first, but it just felt like the energy was there. It kind of reminded me of the Greensboro game in the respect that even though I wasn't there, it's an arena that they probably weren't sure if they could fill that many seats, but they did, because Greensboro holds about 20,000, and they got about almost 12,000 that night against North Carolina. So what did you think of the game as a whole, and just kind of how cool it is that we broke the attendance record there?
So I think the game as a whole, like you said, slow start, rims were tight. Paige only had 3 points in the whole first half. She had 22 total, so she had a really big 19-point second half, which was really good to see. The game itself, I think, was a good one for the Huskies, though. You know what I'm saying? It showed their resilience. First quarter, things were pretty close, and I really like to see at the end of the half, they went on a 15-2 run to kind of close that out, which, again, it shows, okay, like, even under a little bit of adversity and things like that, we still powered through, still did well. The only thing I didn't love was Paige had 22, Sarah had 26, and then the third highest score was Chen with 9, and then everyone else, I think, had like 2, 0, 4. That's the only thing. The spread of points wasn't my favorite thing in the world. And again, don't get me wrong, I love it if that's the case. You win, a win's a win. But when it comes down to tournament time, and I know I'm the biggest person when I say tournament time. But when it comes down to March, they're going to put 2 really good defenders. Teams are going to have defenders that are going to be able to, make life a living hell for Paige and probably limit Sarah. Or if somebody like Sarah gets into foul trouble, and then like the USC game, and they were able to play Paige really well defensively, who's going to stand up? And that's the only thing that worries me a little bit. Fudd didn't have a super great night. And again, it doesn't have to be everybody's night. It doesn't have to be everybody getting in the scorebook, but I do want the point spread to be a little bit a little bit better than, the third highest scorer having 9 points. And again, they didn't need it for Creighton, but I just want some other players finding some identity and being consistent in that identity on the season.
Yeah, and I think there's some other key takeaways. I think those are all great points. I think for me, some of the key takeaways is Aubrey didn't play. So I think that's also part of kind of her working her way back into, getting 10, 12 minutes a game and hopefully more. So that kind of put a strain on the backcourt because Jana played 9 minutes, Morgan played 5, Ice played 8. So you didn't see anything from Ali Zabal. You saw Ashlyn Shade and KK Arnold play some big minutes off the bench, 24 and 22 respectively. I think, though, the only counter to that I would say is you don't need to have a big point spread from others if your 2 of your top 3 scorers go for 22 plus, especially with Sarah. How even I mean, Paige wasn't as efficient as she usually is because she had an off first half, but I mean, she still shot just under 50% from the floor.
Right.
Sarah was 50%, 9 of 17, didn't miss a free throw, was everywhere, felt like on the floor. So I think the only issue that I will have going forward is if we don't have that third scorer, that can kind of, that it is when Sarah does have foul trouble. She did have 4 fouls in that game. Really didn't matter as much, but it's going to be when, they play Tennessee in a couple weeks or here almost in less than 2 weeks. And then again, playing South Carolina on the 16th of February. So it's just like, you just have to wonder sometimes, like, so as for all of the flowers I've thrown Sarah's way right now, and for all of the love fest that we've had with, the games against Villanova and Seton Hall, where they've just destroyed people, it still is really the same burning question is, how will they look against, honestly, I think the Tennessee game's a win. I know it's on the road and they're a tough team.
I agree.
They're playing the SEC, but it's
agree.
really about how do they look against South Carolina? Even if they lose that game against South Carolina, is it a close game? Do they get their doors blown off because South Carolina is just more athletic or whatever it is? Like that to me is more so what I'm looking forward to in the rest of these games up until that South Carolina game is really, again, just essentially just a learning ground for this team and a way for them to stay sharp.
I agree. That's what it comes down to at this point. Again, Creighton definitely, second. They're ranked second in the Big East, so this was definitely a really good win for them. But again, you can't beat that playing South Carolina and playing Tennessee both on the road. It's definitely going to show a lot. Now, the other thing I want to note is they shot 40% from the field, which was their season lowest, and they also shot 20% from 3. If those numbers, if you take the 20% and make it 30%, and the 40% and make it 50%, which is more of their season average, probably goes a lot different. And obviously, it's not great to shoot those percentages, but it was their season low, so that
that bodes well.
It definitely, that was a good sign, and we still won that game slightly convincingly, especially in the second half. First half, things were a little bit different. Second half, like you said, they kind of started to run away with it. Creighton tried to make a little bit of a comeback. But beyond that, I think those shooting percentages and still coming away with a double-digit win says a lot about this team. And the one thing I also wanted to say, which I didn't get to touch on, was the attendance. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we're watching greatness. I mean, 30 years ago. So let me show you my shirt that I'm wearing today. Mark, I'm wearing a shirt and it says it's Gino and CD's. It's the shirt that they gave out on their 40th, 40-year, anniversary
for sure.
of them coaching together, and when Gino broke the win record. He said in his speech that night that when Gamble first opened, that they didn't know if they were going to be able to fill the arena. They didn't know how they were going to get fans in the seats, and they thought they were literally going to have to give tickets away, give things away to entice fans to come to the games. Nowadays, we're putting a queue on the student ticket website, and you're lucky to get a ticket, especially to these bigger games. I mean, you have to be on there, and it's just by the grace of God that you get these tickets. So to have to switch to a bigger arena is special. Like that's the thing. It's so special. And again, some people are like, oh, it's great. But I think we really have to stop and realize like girls basketball even 5 years ago wasn't experiencing this.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, it's just not. It's a great thing to see for women's basketball and for kids that
Well,
are 10 years old and 12 years old. I mean, the future is very bright.
no, I agree, and I'll take it a step further. I know it's not in Gamble, but the UConn game against South Carolina on Sunday the 16th, the least expensive ticket in that arena is $86. The most expensive ticket that's available on GameTime, one of our sponsors, is $1,045 a seat.
Insane.
So yes, and those are obviously third-party markets. That's not what South Carolina is charging for their season tickets.
I would hope not. Yeah.
But at the same time, that's part of it. Is like UConn is such a draw that I guarantee you, if we went back and looked at those Creighton numbers, like in terms of like what the price of a ticket costs, they'd be insane, because it's like when UConn comes to town once a year. So you get to see Paige, you get to see Sarah, you get to see AZ, all these big names that UConn has. Gino, Gino's a draw in itself. Like for years, college, and it still is this. Like Dawn Staley is the show at South Carolina. Mm-hmm. I mean that's just how it is. And so Kim Mulkey, same thing in LSU. You go there just to see what kind of weird, funky outfit she's going to wear, right?
Literally,
so
absolutely.
it's just one of those things where these are personality sells, and Paige is that personality. It's why Caitlin Clark was such a big draw. People wanted to go see her and all the different things that she could do on the floor. So you're 1,000% right. The future is definitely bright. We talked about this a couple weeks ago with Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier starting Unrivaled. So there's so many things that are becoming the norm for women's basketball. The beautiful thing is being you're a eventual UConn grad, and me being a Connecticut native, it's always been like that with the state of Connecticut. So we can always say that we were on the ground floor for this kind of explosion of women's basketball. So that's the good stuff. Let's take a quick break and what's coming ahead, which is a couple games until the Tennessee game, a couple games until the South Carolina, but we'll also look at where UConn ranks right now in the seeding world. If anything has changed, not much, spoiler alert. And we'll talk about that coming up after the break. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, you can even do the coin toss. FanDuel makes it easy to get in the action. You could even do the length of the national anthem, over under. From the thrill of kickoff to the final whistle, live betting is also a big feature that I personally like to do. It's right in the app. It's super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Just bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn with Bella Tamano, Hoops Capital of the World, as well as a Locked On UConn co-host and contributor. Okay, so we talked about it. We agree to disagree on Sarah Strong being the best player in the country. I may be a little early on that, but I'm going to stick to my guns there. And then we talked a little bit about the attendance and how great that was. Gino said in the postgame how amazing it is for them to be a part of something like that, because it happens with them all the time. Same thing happened in Greensboro. Where they got 12,000 there against North Carolina. And then we also talked about how amazing it is to just be a part of this kind of like boom that is women's basketball. Because as I said a long time ago, before we even knew each other, what was the rest of the world waiting for? Right. We've been here the whole time. Mm-hmm. What's coming up for this team? Right. We got a game against DePaul and a game against, I believe, I just had it up, and of course I lost it. The schedule is we got DePaul next, at DePaul in Chicago, and then home against Butler before we travel to Rocky Top in Old Tennessee and face our old rivals on February 6th. a game that will be televised on ESPN at 6:30. Which game outside of South Carolina, which is on the 16th, are you most excited for? I think it has to be Tennessee, right?
Yeah, I would. Looking at the schedule, like you said, I mean, like you have some Big East teams that are coming up, which it's not going to be a problem. I think it's Tennessee, and I think we kind of alluded to it earlier with the way we're playing right now, especially if Aubrey Griffin's, obviously Gino has a plan for her, but especially if she's ready to kind of get back into a decent groove where she's able to get into that, just crack into the double digit minutes. I don't see us losing that game. I
Yeah.
really don't. I know it's on the road, and I know that they're a ranked team. I think are they 15 or
I
6?
think they're 16th in the country, something like that.
16th in the country.
They're in the SEC. They're in the SEC. So even when you
Yeah,
lose like a game in the SEC, like you don't really drop as much.
yeah,
Because they weight it so much better.
right.
Right now, if we look at the bracket, the Big Ten
Yeah.
has 13 teams in that are slated to be in the tournament. SEC has 10. ACC has 9. Big 12 has 7.
Yeah.
Womp. Big East has 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, and Creighton would be the other one. So, and they're
Right.
like an 8 or a 9 seed. So
Yeah.
right now UConn is, as an automatic qualifier, slated as the 2 seed in the South region, in the Birmingham region, pardon me, which would be South Bend and Notre Dame's region. They would be right now, if everything ended today, it would be UConn versus Navy in Stores, and then with Utah and Harvard as the 7 and 10 on the other side. What do you think of this bracket? So you have Notre Dame as the 1.
Yeah.
You have Maryland as a 3. That's an intriguing game as far as the Sweet 16, because there's a few. I believe there's some UConn transfers on Maryland. That would be that UConn. Listen, and the NCAA always does this. So whenever there's kind of like, whether it's a coaching matchup or former players, expect something wild like this where they're going to play some of their former teammates. Oklahoma's a 4 seed in this bracket. Michigan State's the 5. It doesn't intimidate me. That Maryland game kind of freaks me out a little bit because they're pretty talented.
Yeah.
And then Notre Dame on in a regional final. I still think there's an opportunity if UConn runs the table for them to get a 1 seed, because if they beat Tennessee and South Carolina, run through the Big East like we think they're going to, I mean, who would be? I mean, you have to drop one of them. They would be in the top 3 or 4 in the country at that point.
Exactly. Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think the same thing. I think if you want a 1 seed, you have to win the table at the very least, and then you might have to also hope for a loss from a higher seeded team from now until the rest of the season. Now, looking at the tournament bracket itself, like you said, I see us at the very minimum getting to that Sweet 16. But like you said, Maryland is a little bit of a scary team. If there are some UConn transfers, a lot of emotions.
Amari Berry. Amari DeBerry.
Right, yeah. So there's going to be some emotions in that game, a little bit of extra incentives on the line. And the one thing I don't like is I don't like the Notre Dame draw. I know.
Yeah, I hate it.
If you look at any of the top programs in the league in the women's bracket, I mean, any of the 1 seeds or even the 2 seeds and beyond are going to be tougher matchups. And UConn playing a Big East schedule and only having some like 4 or 5 games on their schedule that really gives them a test is tough, because how prepared are they going to be? But looking at Notre Dame and UConn's history in the NCAA tournament, Notre Dame's got our number. We're 3 and 5 against them in the NCAA tournament. And I also think that regardless of records and everything like that, Notre Dame's is the team that, if you look on social media, like yes, Tennessee was our rival, but I think, and so was Notre Dame. And I think Notre Dame has become, I think in this point in time, our biggest rival, I think in the last couple years, because, when Enrique made the, 3 in the corner in the Final Four, in, what was it, 2018, I think it was. I'd have to fact check myself on that, but
it's okay.
Dating back to that is when that, obviously the Notre Dame rivalry has always been a thing for UConn, but I don't know. They just scare me. Ever since that game, they really have always scared me. And anytime you face them in the tournament, you don't want to.
No, I think part of that is because like it's kind of like what the UConn men are dealing with right now, where no one's afraid of them anymore.
Yeah.
And so like no one's afraid of UConn anymore. And I think in particular because of some of the bad luck, right? So it's like, ooh, Paige, but like who else do you have? Or, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Or so now that they're getting healthy and our girl Sarah is dominating, some of that swagger is coming back, and some of that ability to kind of take a team to the woodshed, so to speak. Like I think that's part of it too. It's like Notre Dame came into that game against UConn with no fear, and I think that's part of what makes Hannah Hidalgo and Sonia Citron so good. Is they're going to kind of come at you with like, we don't really give a rip that you're UConn. We've beaten you before, and you're right, they do have our number, but it's hard to this is you got a Aaron Judge jersey in the back. Sometimes it's hard to beat a team 3 straight times. Like, and I know that they're because I think they're on like a 4-game winning streak. Like, so, which is so wild because I think Notre Dame having that many wins against Gino is kind of like, I think they're the only team, or Niele Ivey might be the only coach to like have a winning streak against Gino of that caliber.
Yeah.
I'll have to fact check that myself as well, but it's usually back and forth. And so like they typically have had our number, but have we been full strength? The answer is no. So I'll take this full team against any in the country right now. And I may eat my words when they play Tennessee or South Carolina, but I don't think so. So that's my take. I think this team fully healthy is one of the top 4 teams in the country.
I agree.
And can easily compete for a national championship. Bella, last words.
Last word was, we talk about health. We saw Caroline warm up.
Good call out.
Almost, yeah. We saw her warm up. We saw her jersey peeking out underneath her warm up. So that's going to be a great sign. She at UConn, I mean, she averages nearly 10 points a game. So again, that's another scorer and defender that'll add to your team. And again, it's going to take her some time to get ready, as it is Aubrey Griffin, but if you can get him ready, that's going to be great. And, when Gino looks down to the bench, having that kind of depth is awesome. And then the other thing too is, even if, I think for UConn fans out there too, is even if they lose to South Carolina, because like I said, I don't see them losing to Tennessee, even if they lose to South Carolina, as long as it's a respectable game, I still think like the only way I think they would drop a 3 seed is if it was just a blowout and we looked awful and somebody got hurt and something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think there's a chance. Now, South Carolina, looking at their history, on the other hand, we haven't beat South Carolina at their home court since 2018, and we've lost 4. Yeah, we've lost 4 straight to them. So that's another thing that stats don't bode well for us.
Yeah, it's one of those things where UConn fans have to wrap their heads around 2 things, and this is the last thing I'll say about any of this, which is, this isn't 2002, this isn't 1995. The women's basketball has much more parity now. There's probably 10 teams that can compete for national championship this year, versus only 2 in the past. Like it was like UConn Tennessee, then UConn Notre Dame, then UConn South Carolina, LSU South Carolina. You know what I mean? Like Iowa.
Yeah.
So like very few teams had like the juice to actually win the whole thing. Mississippi State got a nice run there a couple years back. So it's UConn fans have to remember that it's a new era. So it's going to be harder, and it's one of the reasons why they're working so hard to bring in new talent every year. I think Gino is going to continue to embrace the transfer portal, as time goes on, because you kind of need to. And it's going to be fun. If you make the Final Four every year, that's the goal. If you win a national championship, it should never be championship or the games or the seasons of failure. That should just not be a part of UConn lexicon now. It just shouldn't be.
No, it can't be.
Because it's just not sustainable. Like it's impossible. So you're not going to see, and I guarantee you this, you're just not going to see a team win 4 or 5 straight national championships anymore. It's just not going to be the case. Now
Nope.
watch, because I said that South Carolina will win like the next 10. But
Yeah.
but I doubt that, because so many teams are investing in women's sports now. There's so many more opportunities to coach in other places. Like, what you ended up having was like 4 or 5 teams getting all of the best talent on the coaching and
Yep.
playing side. And now that's spread out between NIL opportunities, between just better coaches everywhere, better players around the country not wanting to fly all the way to UConn. If they're in California, guess what? You can go play for UCLA because they got that program rolling too. So that's the biggest thing right now, is like, everyone take a deep breath. This team is still going to always be a national title contender. But if they don't win it all, let's not call it a failure. Fair?
Definitely fair. I respect it. Yep.
All right. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Bella Tomano, I'm Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected. And remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day. And as always, go Huskies.